Hello, everybody. For anybody who is joining us right now and for some reason is not familiar with any of the people on this wonderful panel, I will start us off with some brief intros, and then I have a nice little icebreaker question for everybody, and I'll tell you why you picked it. So uh, I'll go clockwise for my screen. We have Andrew Reel from T360. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Formerly of Dixon,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes,
And
correct.
so I think that's when we met. Brian Boero, co-founder 1000 Watt. Thanks for joining us, you guys. It seems like every time I turn around, there's a new rebrand that you guys are a part of that just kind of blows my mind away. We have Sarah Roberts from Slifer Smith and Frampton up in beautiful Colorado country. Thanks for joining us. And then, of course, we have Stephanie Anton of Corcoran, who everybody here should also know. She's been involved with a lot and has been everybody in this on this panel has been in the space for quite some time. So just so everybody's clear, if you're wondering how I managed to land such an excellent panel, I had asked Santa at Bass Pro in Orlando, Florida last year to give me the opportunity to host the coolest, the baddest, and the raddest. And I was extra good this year, so Christmas came early.
Zane, that's
Um,
officially my only connection to Bass Pro, so good to know.
awesome, awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to start us off before we get into it. I'm going to ask everybody a question, and a lot of it's not unusual in these webinars for like a little icebreaker question, but I picked this one because similar to what Brian you were saying, you can tell a lot from a person's background. I feel like when you ask somebody this question, you can kind of get a sense of them, one way or the other, depending on what their answer is, and it always has a lot to unpack there. So, and the question is, what is your favorite sport to watch? And what is your favorite team when watching it? And if for whatever reason you're not a fan of any particular sport, who's your favorite athlete? So we'll start with you, Andrew. Favorite sport, favorite team.
Okay. I was really surprised when I was going through my brain, letting it process this, but I'm gonna just go with golf, right? That surprises me because I don't play golf. Um,
But you like to watch it.
at all. But it's surprisingly soothing to watch on television. And and just the commitment that the pros have to their craft is amazing for me. Like they are fully committed, and the real estate industry could learn a lesson from that commitment. So,
Love that. Love that. Any particular golfer you're a fan of?
no,
Okay,
no,
got it. Playing it safe. All right,
yes.
I hear you, Andrew. All right,
I don't need any
Brian.
hate messages in my social
Yeah.
media feed.
Brian, favorite sport to watch, or favorite team, or favorite athlete?
Well, okay, I'm going to mark myself as a very strange person. I don't like sports.
Okay.
So I don't watch sports. I'm not a sports fan at all. Uh, I'm an outlier, admittedly. However, one of my heroes is a sports figure, Muhammad Ali, and for lots of reasons. And I will recommend a good book by David Remnick. He wrote a book on Ali called King of the World, and excellent book. So that's my favorite athlete, Ali.
Love that. Thanks. Sarah, favorite sport, favorite team.
I feel like I'm in good company. I feel, and in hearing the reason why the question also might change my answer a little bit. My husband knows very much that I do not like watching sports ball. That's my joke, is that I always call it sports ball. But I'm a snowboarder, I was a runner, I do all these individual sports, but I can't say I really like watching any of those. But I love watching the Olympics every year. Love it. Love this year. My favorite athlete was Steve Nedorosik, the pommel horse specialist
Oh,
that
wow.
did Rubik's Cube in his spare time. He just came in, did his quiet little domination, and I enjoyed that story and watching that so much. So yeah.
Very cool. Oh, that's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Last but certainly not least, we will go to Ms. Anton.
Well, it's interesting because all four of us are not sports people.
This is amazing. I'm like, oh my God.
But we're still learning a lot about all of
Yeah.
us here.
And
Yeah.
it was actually the hardest question you posed, Zane, because I was like, sports, I'm like, I just recently discovered that I live in Austin and I love the University of Texas tailgates because they're a lot of fun. But yeah, Sarah, I'm like you, right? Like I always have done a lot of individual sports.
Mm.
But all kidding aside, I think, yeah, we watch football or whatever on the screen. I'm like, what are the little costumes? I just don't know. But here's what I'll say is that I think that the best athletes are some of the best entertainers. And so I think some of the best entertainers are the best athletes, and which made me think of this documentary I just watched about Pink. And she is a former gymnast, and she is the most incredible athlete. I would say the same thing about Taylor Swift too. That that's an endurance sport, doing a concert like that. So I think both of them are incredible business women. They stand for something, they have a great message about independence and female strength and power. And so that's my pick, both of those.
I love that. Wow. Some really interesting answers. We've got a book recommendation, a documentary recommendation. We've got a pommel horser that I need to go look up. So thank you for all of that. All right, let's get into it. So the topic of today's webinar, and I thank you all again for hopping on. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, is we have some phenomenal, I would say best in class marketers on this call right now. And I'm really curious to talk about some of the best marketing campaigns that you've seen over this last year. And then towards the tail end of this, we're going to talk about, we're going to flip it on its head a little bit and talk about some things that maybe we should not necessarily lean into, but things that we should avoid doing because that seems to resound quite a bit more. And to kick it off, I'd like to just, starting with Sarah and Brian, let's say, what are some of the top marketing trends you've seen emerge in the residential real estate market? And talk to me about how they've shaped either your campaigns or the campaigns of your clients. Whoever wants to take that one between you two, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. I'm happy to kind of chat what we've seen here in Colorado, but a lot of panic. I think with the NAR changes, people didn't know what to do, what they could say, what they couldn't say. So we saw some agents doing some pretty crazy things on social media, trying through their email blasts, some way to keep business as usual as it was and not change what they were doing. And maybe that kind of goes into what not to do. But we definitely took that, direction of we're not going to do that. We're going to really lean into value proposition, what we do as agents, why agents are important as an industry. I'm learning everything here from Brian himself, but it was really nice to have that clear direction for our agents. We actually had a couple of times where we asked them to maybe take a post down, things like that. But we really leaned into value proposition, and for being a listing focused brokerage, it was an opportunity for us to really look at that buy side. So I really kind of appreciated the opportunity, and we learned a lot.
Interesting. So a trend that you noticed was people trying to buck the trend by like thinking a little too far outside of the box. I think
Yeah.
we've all seen some examples of that. Brian, like this is your craft. You're widely recognized as, the expert in this space. Like when it comes to trends, what did you see kind of bubble up over the course of this past year?
Well, maybe a little bit in line with what Sarah said. I think that the opportunity of this year, which some people seized, was the opportunity to educate through their marketing. And I saw a number of companies do that pretty effectively. And I saw a number of companies and practitioners not do that effectively. And so, obviously the changes around people, how people work with buyers agents and also with sellers. I mean, what a tremendous opportunity to educate. And I think some companies did that really well. And those companies, I think, came out ahead. Other companies either stayed silent or used the occasion maybe to trivialize the changes or rant. There's another example of that wasn't just about the settlement and all the changes, and that was the Fed's rate cut back in September. And we all kind of thought that would change everything, and the Fed would cut rates, and we'd all be back in 2021 magically. And saw lots of social posts and lots of emails going out about how now's the time to buy and all that type of stuff. So I think we missed the mark on educating around that, generally speaking, but education, I guess, would be my theme, either pro or con for the year.
That's interesting. And I think education as a bucket um, can be seen as as sort of a boring topic, right? Not an unimportant one. But education for somebody who isn't necessarily looking to be educated can be a tough sell. So when you mention things that have worked, like what are some ways that people were able to educate their consumer or their market um, while also having it resound and have an effect and catch their eye? Like what are some examples of effective education campaigns or collateral?
I'll give
You
you
know,
one.
yeah, you go.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
Mhm.
I'll give you one, and this is, I guess, a convenient nod to you, Steph. But uh, McInerney, a brokerage that recently affiliated with Steph's brand, Corcoran, in Washington, D.C., really was proactive about educating the marketplace. And I should also say Cybersmith and Frampton did this very effectively, proactively educating the marketplace about what a good buyer agent is and does. Really stepped into that early and didn't
Mm,
react to the changes, but started socializing that message in the early part of the year. And that doesn't have to be boring or dry because, as we found time and again, people really had no idea what a good buyer agent was or what the value they actually delivered. It's not finding people a house. That's not it. So like, yes, it's boring, but there's also this sense of revelation or truth telling
mm,
that can be involved in there that makes it a little less boring than it might otherwise be.
sure, I like that.
And I was going to say, I've just, being on social media, watching what agents are doing at their level. And there's some doing some great, really kind of creative things and kind of peeling back the curtain a little bit and having some fun with it and really, putting themselves out there. This is what I do. This is what I know. And this is why I'm important. And then there's the silly ones that maybe they're just trying to get some attention and win listings because they're doing silly home tours. But hey, if it's working for them, good on them.
Yeah,
Think,
yeah, I
am I
was
allowed to weigh in on
yeah,
this too?
go for it.
Yeah,
You're allowed
okay.
to do whatever you want.
I
Yeah.
was gonna agree, but also say that you're right, Brian, in that people who got out in front and educated people, I think we're also close to it, right? And so we forget what we think is obvious isn't so obvious. But the most important thing I think people did was, and what we did really focused on was educating our agents to tell their story. And, we have a buyer presentation. And so we created like kind of a, what's the process for working with a buyer's agent in our document, in our presentation. And it was like a silly thing, but it was buyer's agents in a lot of cases didn't have a history of having to talk about a lot of that. And so there was panic, but then in the end, especially the good ones, all said, well, this is great because now I'm helping them understand more clearly what they're paying me for. And so there's no weirdness in the process. So in the long run, I think in some ways it was a good thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I would actually agree that I've heard a lot of talk about brokerages putting together buyer presentations, almost um, a frenzied sort of like, we have to do this now. What do we do? And to your point, some people kind of just sat at the table and said, oh man, like, how do we put together 5, 10, however many pages, communicating the value of what a buyer agent does and what buyer agency is. And so that all falls into this category of education. Before I move on to the next question I have, I'd be curious to go around the horn and just say, for anybody who's struggling right now to put together a meaningful and resounding buyer presentation, what's one key point of information that you would make sure you are shown a light on or articulated as a brokerage or an agent was at the drawing board to put this buyer presentation together?
I know for us, it was minimizing that home search piece. It's in there. It's part of the, we have a little process, but it's really, here's everything else that happens. And everything happens after you've gone to contract. Here's all the things, but really, yeah, we have buyer search tools and help you find a home, but we minimized that language.
Well, the
Well
I
said.
would,
search function is this much of the whole process, and that's never been discussed. Never. In the many brokerages that I've, you know, affiliated with and had communications with and relationships with, it's just never been discussed because everybody was afraid of it for some reason.
Mhm.
Well, not to Brian, because Brian, you guys did this amazing research that
Yes.
showed sort of what a consumer expected, how much time and the consumer was expecting that a buyer's agent was spending in their business, and then on a transaction and the reality. And so just simple things like that, the number of hours a buyer's agent spends working with a client on average is revelatory. So kudos to you guys for that. So I would include that kind of data.
Yeah, and I would say along those lines, Steph, the number one thing that we have found in all of our research, consumer research with buyers, is when you sort of really push them, the thing that they value most from a buyer agent is risk mitigation. This thing that I'm doing is big and scary and high stakes for me emotionally and personally. De-risk this deal for me. And when you think about how that translates into what you do, that's reading between the lines on disclosures and inspections, uncovering the things that the seller doesn't want to be uncovered, having an effective offer strategy so you don't overpay for a house. I mean, that's what a great buyer agent does, is they effectively de-risk or mitigate the risk on the deal. And that's number one when we talk to consumers. This thing is scary. Help me not screw it up.
And
That's
get
a
the best
great
deal.
point. And get the best deal. Yeah. All
I know
right.
for us, going through the process of creating this buyer presentation made us relook at our seller presentation. Like, we need to put this same kind of language, everything that goes into selling and listing a home, beyond all the marketing and the things that they expect, but all the nuts and bolts. We made this piece to educate brokers, so they felt like they had a safety blanket going into these conversations. So we're going to do the same thing and create a little smaller brochure for sellers too. Same kind of talking points.
That's awesome. To kind of piggyback off that a little bit, as various brokerage marketing teams are putting these pieces of collateral together, they're also always having to balance the question of like lead gen versus brand building. And it's always, it's sometimes bifurcated, sometimes they work in concert. But I'll ask this to you, Steph. How, like in your experience, like how do you balance like the campaigns of lead gen, which are generally more short term, with long term brand building, so that way you can get this nice little marriage between the two. You're building trust, you're building awareness, which hopefully subsequently leads to lead gen, and it's sort of a that cycle that repeats itself. So how do you, or how do any brokerage marketing teams balance that lead gen and long-term brand building?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm glad you're kind of asking it up front, Zane, because I think that, and I'll caveat it for the Corcoran point of view, because Corcoran is in a unique position because we're a 50-year-old brokerage, number one in Manhattan, long, long, long time in the business, but we rolled out a franchise business, almost 5 years ago now, and so we've gone through the process of having to introduce the brand in, over 50 markets, and we've learned a lot along the way. So I think that a lot of people could probably relate to pieces of what I'll share, because the tactics are totally different, and the need for lead gen and it is always there, but brand building changes based on the evolution of the brand over time. And both are important, but the mix and the balance is an art, and it really is. So, as we, have introduced the brand to new markets, we've had to, focus on brand building first. And that's a whole thoughtful and strategic approach. And it's a brand introduction, and it's a consideration, and it's awareness, and then it's a lead gen. And then we use different tactics, and we target different audiences too. So we have this kind of omni-channel media approach, where we're targeting high net worth consumers, but also, the industry, and then also really hyper local people that are interested in buying and selling or investing. And so we use traditional media. We love outdoor, especially in urban markets. Outdoor has been great for us. And then we use a lot of digital and social. Digital and social tends to be more of our lead gen and more short term. And then the more traditional media tends to be more of our long term brand building. I know we're going to talk about messaging probably a little bit more later, but the messaging is the magic, but the tactics and that mix are sort of where the rubber meets the road. So we use like shelter publications, like I'm sure most brokerages, Arc Digest, things like that. But we also use media, and that's a little bit more for brand awareness. I mentioned the outdoor, like we do New York City taxi cabs. We have, like, when you get in the taxi cab, we have a little commercial, the annoying commercial that you always want to mute, we do that. And lots of fun things that sort of are unexpected. And then digital and social, it's been a big, big important part of all of our tactics, but we use retargeting and things like that for more driving lead gen. So it's a combination, and it's not a one size fits all.
Sure. And so if I'm a brokerage, let's say 300 agents in not a metropolitan market, let's just say, or not a huge metropolitan market. Let's just say I'm in Kansas City, not that that's not a great city, or even somewhere else like Canton, Ohio. And I'm trying to figure out how to balance lead gen. I'm looking at the budget that I have. And I know it's not one size fits all, but what would your advice be to people who are like struggling with, and we'll talk about measurement here immediately after this, but like, what would your advice be to somebody who's trying to figure out the balance between those two types of campaigns?
Yeah. Well, it depends sort of how long the brand has been in the market, because that goes to brand awareness too. So if it's a new brand in the market, 70-80% needs to be brand awareness, 90% even. But if the brand has been around a longer time, I think you can add lead gen tactics to sort of make up 30-40% of your media mix. And that really kind of changes over time.
Okay, that makes sense. And Andrew, I have a question for you and Steph, and anybody else, feel free to chime in. When we talk about lead gen, it's a very quantitative analysis. Like after a campaign ends, it's like, here's how much we spent, here's how many leads we generated, here's how many converted, right? And so it's really easy to kind of look at that baseline to make a determination on whether or not a lead gen campaign was successful. It's a little bit harder when you're doing outdoor or really going on that brand awareness. I mean, not everybody has the resources to survey a market and establish a baseline and then come back and see what the effect of that was. So, Andrew, I know you're a very analytical guy. What are some of the key metrics and KPIs that somebody should be looking at to measure the success of a marketing campaign? And maybe there are some examples of measurements that could go overlooked sometimes.
Yeah, and I kind of focused on what might be overlooked.
Perfect.
There's the obvious ones, and surprise, surprise, I do have a few slides to put together, which Charlotte, I will put up, and Zane, I'll go ahead and share that on my screen here. So, just to keep it from me being a talking head, right? So, understanding doing an analysis of your lead sources, what channels are bringing in higher quality leads and not just the most leads. So we need higher, and this can apply to traditional or digital, right? So which channels are bringing in the higher quality leads? How quickly are those potential buyers or sellers responding to your agent's outreach or your inside sales team outreach? Engagement on the high intent action. So someone schedules a showing, requests more information on a listing or using the mortgage calculator. How strong is that engagement as compared to all others? The click-through rate on interactive features. So you should be understanding if you have 3D tours and floor plans and neighborhood guides on your website, or you're putting them on your social media, what is that click-through rate on those interactive features? And I think something that's really overlooked is the click-to-action ratio. So someone views a virtual tour, someone looks at that floor plan, where they look at the neighborhood information and then they proceed to schedule a showing or reach out to get more information. Finally, repeat engagements. How many times is a lead returning? And when I say lead, I mean a person. Leads are people. So how many times are those people returning to interact with the content that you have? And then with regards to your agents, how many clients are returning for new transactions, not just to the brokerage, but to that specific agent, and vice versa. So, and then how many leads are coming from existing clients' recommendations? I think very few brokerages really have a clear understanding of those KPIs. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
And for anybody who, so some of those are really interesting and things that even I myself haven't necessarily tracked over the years. I would assume there are some people out there who are saying like, okay, how do I track when somebody views a virtual tour and then proceeds to schedule an appointment? What would you say to people with those kinds of questions?
I would say engage your partners, your tech partners, to build out the resources available in the tech that you already have. Don't add technology on top of what you already have, but engage your partners. Your true tech partners will work with you to build out that tracking
Love
process.
it. And then one other point I'll make is on the referral part of that on your slides. Obviously, everybody places this inherent value on referrals, and we've seen all of the best testimonial you can give me as a referral to one of your friends, taglines and magnets and stickers. Um, but I think it's important to kind of underline that because in our space many moons ago, I was working with an e-commerce company, and there were some metrics that we do track in our space now. But one thing that I don't know that we're necessarily keeping track of is this idea of customer lifetime value, like CLV. So if you're selling trinkets, you know how much value one particular consumer can bring to your organization in terms of revenue. And at $5 a keychain, if they buy 3 times, then that's worth 15 bucks in rent, right? When we look at the customer lifetime value of a home, somebody involved in the home transaction, we're not talking trinkets. We're talking massive amounts of dollars in revenue. So I would also just add to that, like I would encourage everybody, even if it's napkin math, like figure out what the lifetime value of a consumer in your market is. And maybe that will help you be more motivated to track some of those KPIs and metrics that you just went over, Andrew. So thank
And
you.
it's not just the home buying and selling
Right.
transaction. It's the mortgage, all the ancillary services, how, that should be part of the lifetime value of a
Sure.
client as well.
I agree. Yeah. So we've talked about what to measure. We've talked about balancing, lead gen with brand awareness. We've talked tactics. As Shinzu once said in The Art of War, which I think I'm sure everybody's read, but strategy without tactics is the longest path to victory, and tactics without strategy is a noise before defeat. I mentioned that because I don't want to only talk tactics. There's a strategy and an art involved with storytelling. We all know that anything that can make us feel emotionally connected to a brand or a product is exponentially more likely to engage us in that brand or product. And we have some of the best storytellers in our space, the best storytellers in our space on this call right now. So I'll start with Brian or staff and we can open it up, but I would like to ask, how do you, fundamentally, how do you use storytelling to enhance the emotional appeal of your campaigns? And I'm not talking about find a sappy soundtrack and then slow-mo a kid running across the lawn. Like we've all seen that, right? How do we effectively use storytelling to really pull at the heartstrings and engage emotional appeal when we're talking about buyers or sellers?
Don't forget about the golden retriever too. You
Oh yeah,
gotta,
golden retriever. Yes, yes,
Babies
that
and
is part of the
dogs.
formula. Yeah.
I think we defer to Brian Boero on this topic. I have
Oh.
something to say too, but I want Brian to go first.
Well, can I take one step back to measurement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Metrics and dashboards and all of that stuff are more often than not, in my experience within the real estate space, uh, they are a bit of a distraction. And when people look at a dashboard or they track metrics, they think that tracking the metrics or looking at the dashboard is actually the end of the whole exercise, right? So I have seen data obsessed people who do not go beyond obsessing on the data. The point of data is to then derive insights, formulate hypotheses, and act upon them. And so that's my one caveat on that. Andrew's totally right on everything he said, but I think data and metrics sort of lull us into a false sense of accomplishment. That enough about that. But
No,
so
that is a good point. Thank you for bringing it up.
I have a lot to say
storytelling.
too on that, but let's
And I
move on.
agree.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Storytelling. On just one point on storytelling, there are lots of ways to tell a story. There are just a very few basic story structures, but lots of ways to tell those stories. I would say it's always good to have an enemy, and it's always good to know what you believe in and what you don't believe in, and what you're for and what you're against. If you can't figure out what you're for and against as a brand, or you don't have a point of view as a brand, or if your brand does not have an enemy, and that enemy doesn't have to be a person, it could be a state of being, it could be the way the real estate is in your market. If you don't have those things, it's hard to tell a compelling story, right? Because whether we like to admit it or not, people are drawn to conflict, and people like to take sides. And what you're trying to find by telling a story is the people who are on your side. And that's, I guess, my first piece of advice on storytelling is find out what you're for and what you're against, which is just as important. And that will enable storytelling for you in a way that you can actually run with.
So can I jump in real quick and ask you? I'm going to put you on the spot here, Brian. In our space, generally, people tend to overexert themselves in making sure that they're not offending or excluding or anybody and anything, right? Because everybody is a customer, everybody's a member of the community. And so I'd ask you very generically, item number one out of your list of potential enemies or potential points of views, without diving too deep into the war chest. What's an example, just to get people's brains going, of a point of view or an enemy that they can single out?
I'll give you a really easy one.
Okay.
So, and that's particularly salient given the changes in the industry. So, if you're a good brokerage, a good agent, good team lead, take pride in your work, take care of clients, really good at what you do, then you have in your marketplace hundreds, if not thousands, of people who you're not for. In other words, you're against. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of knuckleheads who are not doing justice to the way real estate should be done in your view. Now, I'm not suggesting you go out there and go negative and call out people, but you can be an advocate for quality representation. And in part of that advocacy, you can highlight for people what a good agent really is and what good service really is. And also, more importantly, what a not so great agent is and what not so great representation is. We're very afraid, I think, in large part due to the history of cooperation compensation. We have this sort of oath of silence in this business where I'm going to have to work with him or her at some other deal down the road, and we shared compensation. I think that didn't really help us much. And we should, if you're good at what you do, you need to call out those who do not live up to your standard more aggressively.
Love that. Steph, anything you'd like to add, or Andrew, Sarah? You're muted there, Steph.
Sorry, I was so lost in Brian's reflections. Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think you have to know not only who you are, but who you're not, and be totally okay with that. And if you look at all of the brands that we're inspired by and that we look to, Microsoft is a brand that's all things to all people, and Apple is not. And so sort of look at that and say, Apple knows who they are and who they're not, and it's okay. And so get inspired by that kind of perspective. I think for Corcoran, the storytelling component, and we've been talking about storytelling for so long, we all have, but I think we've done a really good job of sort of bringing that to life in a very unique way. And it's an interesting story, and forgive me if I know some of you may have heard me specifically tell the story, but what's not so unique about Corcoran is that we were founded by a woman leader whose name is on the door, and we bought the company in 2001, and she exited, left. And so how do you, Barbara hasn't been part of Corcoran in 22 years. And so how do you make a brand stand for something that is not the human, whose name is at the door. And, Sarah, I know you know that. Andrew, I know you know that experience. And Brian, I mean, all the rebrands you guys do. So, but what was unique about the way that Corcoran went about it long before I was there, so I can take no credit, Christina Panos, who's our CMO, and Pam Liebman, who's our CEO, were really the architects of this, but they did a bunch of research and did exactly, Brian, what you said, which is sort of understand who you are and what you stand for. And it was just very, very well done. And so, we recognized early on that we had this sort of like understanding that home was the best way that people could represent themselves. It's a reflection of who they are. And that we were really wanting to be focused on the people part of the business. And we all know that buying and selling is a very emotional process, but that sort of understanding that can't be commoditized. And so particularly for a high-end real estate brokerage with its high service focused, this was something we could then turn into our belief system and our DNA. And so we outlined our DNA and recognized that the things that we stand for are that we're personal, but also playful. And so we're not afraid to have fun with some of our marketing. And then also a little bit sharp. Some of that is the sort of New York City background, but it's also, I think, a bit of the secret sauce of marketing. When something is a little bit sharp, that's what makes you remember or pay attention to it. And so we've designed all of our ad campaigns around these concepts, and then our tagline, which is live who you are. And so through that, and I have some samples to show, but I think we're going to run out of time, Zane, so I'm not going to show them. I'll just explain to you a little bit about, we took the sort of stories behind homes and we highlighted the consumers in our ads. So rather than show listings, we told the stories of the people sitting in their actual homes and tied it to the emotional component of the buying and selling process and how what we do is different. And it's something we've been doing for a long time, and it's been very successful. We've evolved that now to a campaign we call Be Home, which is awesome because during the pandemic, we had a campaign called Be Home. And it was all about celebrating sort of the ways in which you can most be yourselves and how your home represents you and your reflection of your personality. And so we've been able to evolve that over time too. So it's been fun.
And I would say we took for granted that we knew who we were, and we assumed everybody else knew we were. And our work with 1000 Watt and our rebrand was a therapy session for our executive team. And I think there was a quote, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And I say it all the time, and it's so true. And it's really helped us be more bold about our storytelling and being much more out there and showing what's inside the company and our culture and the fun. And it's been very well received. It's still, it's us. And that's like, yes, that is us. That's what we've been trying to say, but we weren't doing a great job of saying it. So thanks for the therapy.
You can't read the label from inside
Here's
the jar.
$10.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Was that,
Yeah.
was that extra charge, Sarah?
Yeah.
The therapy sessions?
So in a moment, we'll start to wrap up, and I'll ask each of you to highlight a particular campaign or campaigns that really stood out to you in 24. But a question popped into my mind as we're talking about storytelling and evangelizing our, what we stand for, and running campaigns, that we also have to take into account that within each of our own markets, there are different segments, right? There are luxury home buyers, there are first-time home buyers, there are downsizers, so on and so forth. We all talk about personas. I'll never forget the first time I was ever at Zillow headquarters. They had their personas, with like actual portraits of like Debbie Downsizer and Freddie, the first time home buyer. They had, and like huge posters just like lined up against the wall, right? And each of them had their their different needs and wants outlined. And so that's how seriously they took personas, which is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about just different marketing segments and campaigns. So Sarah, you in particular are in a market that it's pretty luxurious, but there might be some, relatively lower end homes in different markets that you service. How do you tailor those different marketing campaigns to appeal to the different buyer segments?
Like you said, I'm very fortunate to be living where I live, working where I work. I'm sitting at the base of Beaver Creek Resort in the Vail Valley. Our average home sale price is 2.5 million. We are the market share leader by a lot in the luxury market. So it is, for our segments, it might look a little bit different, but we do look at those. Maybe it's the first time second home owner who's looking for that weekend ski condo. They haven't done it before. they've been coming up here for vacation, maybe they've been renting. So that would almost be our closest thing to a first-time home buyer. There is the local market, people like me living here, raising my family here. We're all kind of down valley, as we call it. And then we have agents that work the gamut. We have agents very focused on that luxury high-end clientele. And we have to be careful too, like over explaining can seem like kind of talking down to somebody that's purchased and bought homes again and again. But we want to be seen as that local expert. More than anything, through all these segments, we're sharing a lifestyle. That's where I think I'm very, very fortunate. We lean a lot into that local culture and our mantra, our Colorado calling. And we want those people, whether it's their, weekend starter home, maybe they plan on doing their first investment property. We want to share that lifestyle with them. And I think our new branding really hits all those levels. It's able to be high-end, sophisticated, and it's also approachable. It's like we say, it's luxury at every price point. And so we do have brokers that would maybe focus on that more local market, the more lower end, and they focus on being involved with communities. They put their marketing dollars into sponsorships, events, being on boards, being the boots on the ground, local experts, and everybody knows who they are. Everybody knows that they're the ones to call if you have any questions. And that's who my real estate broker is. So I'm really proud to say that I work with her because she's just so fantastic in working with that local market. And then we have very high-end, luxury that they're dealing with very high-end clients that have a very high set of expectations too.
Love that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we could each spend another hour or two talking about like what the fluid definition of luxury is,
Yeah.
across the board, which might be a fun webinar one of these days. So, but before we get too far off topic, I just have two questions for each of you. We'll go round robin, and the first question, and this is just to bring it all home on what the title of this webinar was or is. The first question is, I'd like each of you to spend 60 seconds, maybe a little more, highlighting a particular campaign or campaigns from this past year, 2024, that really stood out, whether in terms of how proud you were of the way it resounded with your audience, how well it performed from a lead gen perspective. But talk to me about, highlight a particular one that stood out and tell me what made it work. And we'll start at the top of my screen here. That's you, Steph.
Okay. So I mentioned our Be Home campaign. So it's an annual campaign that we run around the course of the year. So we last year for the first time did something called Be Home for the holidays. And so we tied it into a holiday campaign and and actually it's dropping tomorrow. We do like a 23-page glossy insert in the Wall Street Journal and we drive traffic to it. And it has been a resounding success. People because we're tying into the fun campaign that we normally do. But actually, you know what, I can just quickly, if you don't mind, I'll show you some examples because this is, let's see if I can not screw this up. This is
It'll be Zane's fault if that happens.
Yeah, blame it on me.
Yeah. All right. So this is the normal Be Home campaign. So it shows sort of a TikTok dad and his daughter kind of playing and says, be trending, be sinking, be savage, be home. And then this is the version that we did for Be Home for the holidays. And so it just highlights them, having some fun over the holidays. And then a whole campaign around that. So be hats, be mittens, be smitten, be home. And so this will all start to run tomorrow. And we've really found that it's been very successful. People are, we're fine. Last year, in fact, we had a home run in Dallas. Sorry, I'm having trouble stop showing my screen here. Okay. We had a home in Dallas sell directly from the insert. So.
Oh, wow. Well, I love that. And I think the takeaway there is, even as I was reading those, like the first thing I thought was that this is fun. Like you can be fun as a brand, but also be serious about the business that you do. And they're really well made. So awesome. Hopefully somebody gets some inspiration from that. Brian, you've got your pick of the litter. I mean, you're the wizard behind the curtain on a lot of these things. So what stands out to you as a particular campaign or exercise that stands out?
Well, I'm going to bring this up because I was just there and it's fresh in my mind. But we worked with Nest Realty, which I think a few of you know those folks,
Mhm.
our brokerage company and a franchisor based on the East Coast. And we worked with them over the course of this summer and early fall to sort of reimagine the brand identity, but also all of the things that go with that in terms of the brand's personality and tone and whatnot. And I was with them earlier this week, actually just on Monday, where they, launched that and revealed it at their annual event. And, you know, eh, I'll tell you, I know I keep harping on this, but when you talk about measurement and metrics, the biggest metric that I like is vibe. And in that room, with hundreds of agents at that moment, the vibe was ecstatic and very, very positive. If you can make your agents or your franchisees feel good, if you can make them feel confident going into the world with an identity or a campaign, then you've won. As we all know, ultimately the agents deliver the consumers in many cases, not to say we shouldn't be doing consumer marketing, but the agents are a big part of that. And just making them feel awesome is like metric number one. So the Nest campaign and the Nest identity, they're just launching it now. So look for it. It's going to be out there.
Love that. And I know that sometimes you guys highlight certain pieces of work on your site. Do you plan to put that up if anybody wanted to check that out?
We do, we can't, we don't share work before the client shares the work.
Right.
It'll be up there soon enough.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to check that out, and also some of the other great things you've done, definitely go to 1000 Watts website for that. Andrew, over to you, sir.
So I'm not going to put up the slides that we had discussed saying,
Okay.
but I will share that, T360 organizes the exhibit awards annually. So I have the luxury of seeing over 400 brokerages submissions. They're all sending in their best marketing collateral. And a lot of those submissions were a direct result of 1000 Watts work, and inspired, I'm sure, by Sarah and Stephanie's teams as well. There's nothing new out there. Everything that's out there has been used before. But what stood out to me in the winners and the runners up, and a lot of the submissions were the stories. This is like a common thread here through this whole webinar, stories that connected the brokerage back to the community in which they serve, and in the community service that the agents and the brokerage are doing, right? So uh, it's been a tough few years for the reputation of the industry. And, I think that connecting the dots back to the community just really resonates with the public and helps to create a stronger brand engagement. So I don't have one campaign to call out. I could, but there are many out of that 400, but that's the common theme is the stories around the community and the community service of the brokerage and the agents.
Love that. And Sarah, how about you? What's something that stood out for you guys over this past year?
No, I think this is an opportunity to go ahead and share this Colorado calling campaign that I've been talking about. And do so. Let's see. I would like to show Google Chrome.
It's surprisingly hard, isn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, it doesn't give you any preview, does it? I know it's desktop too, so we'll do that. There we go. To do so, I'm going to show. Can you see it yet? Is it going?
Not yet.
There we go.
Still not
Allows
yet.
in. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's that Apple security. I can already tell you're on a Mac.
Okay, well, you know what? Later, because it wants me to restart Zoom to give you that permission. Darn. Okay. I will do that before I restart Zoom. I would love to show that, but a Colorado calling campaign. Oh, you bring it up. Thank you. That is the one. So to do so, I'm showing you this brochure which we've used the segments of this in multiple different campaigns, but this is the piece that kind of puts it all together. There's a beautiful website that complements this. We use the tagline, Our Colorado Calling, but go ahead and just flip through if you'd like. There's our mantra, Colorado people, Colorado communities. We use that one a lot. Why being local is important. It goes through, some of our company stats, but this is deeply rooted in Colorado. And this gives you an idea too, some of the fun colors we've been leaning into, the historical photos of Vail, how we are a destination, we got to call it home. And I love that one. And then of course,
cool
this
map.
fun map. So I actually have, I don't know if you can see my water bottle, but I have my stickers on here. We made stickers out of these really fun graphic maps that the 1000-watt team created for us. And we've had a lot of fun with the more graphic version of this map rather than being so literal. And yeah, just more of the colors, and it kind of explained what this really meant to us. It's like I said, it's not stuffy, but it's elevated. And I absolutely love, this is my favorite colors that we've gotten to use. We can use all these different colors together. And then this is my favorite part, our 6 simple beliefs that guide everything we do. Keep it local. It's about more than money. We mean what we say. We show up for each other. Loyalty is gold. And our CEO's favorite, fun is always free. It's not. Parties cost money. But no, we do
That's
have a lot of fun. Thank you for
That's
sharing.
great. Awesome. So we've learned from Stephanie and Corcoran, that there's a way you can be fun and build trust, but also appeal to the emotional aspects of our consumers. From Brian, we've learned, amongst other things, I'm just summarizing here before we wrap it up, have an enemy and stand for something, which I think is very important. Andrew talked about a lot of the metrics when we learned some things that we might not have otherwise considered when evaluating campaigns. We also learned that you can't, it's not enough to just look at them. You have to do something about them. And Sarah, obviously, as you just showed us, like really tying into the community, and Andrew, you spoke to this as well, and having fun, but also being willing to educate in a way that resounds is very important as well. Last question for each of you, in 10 words or less, if you can, because we do have to wrap. And I could personally sit on this webinar for the next 3 hours with all of you together, and I would enjoy every moment of it. But we've talked a lot about what we should be doing, what we've seen happen over the last year, what's worked, what other people can do to kind of emulate some of that success. What I'd like each of us to sign off with is one piece of advice or one thing that you should absolutely steer clear of or stay away from as you embark upon these marketing messages. And I hope I'm not stealing anybody's answer here, but one thing that I will kind of kick us off with, if maybe it'll help, is I would just say steer clear of throwing AI on everything. Make sure that you know what you're talking, make sure that there actually is AI, and you can clearly articulate the benefit for that. We have a product, for example, that really utilizes AI to the advantage of its capabilities in a way that really helps the users of our product work. So we don't use it arbitrarily, and I would say that I think a lot of people are getting AI fatigue. So make sure that you're articulating like what that means when you're labeling it as that. So I'm free for all, jump ball. Who wants to take it first? One thing that everybody should be steering clear of. Andrew, go for it.
Don't become paralyzed by perfection or fear. That perfect thing out there doesn't exist. So do the best you can and move forward with confidence. That would be my
Love
advice.
that. Go fast and break things. Yeah.
Break the
Ditto,
things,
Sarah, was
only break the things that can be repaired.
true.
I think a big theme today, I don't know if we've said the word, but it's authenticity. And we all talk to our agents about getting updated headshots and how it's an inauthentic experience, right? But the other one I think we miss a lot in this business is stock photography. Just stop using stock photography. I think it's just not an authentic way to articulate anything in your market.
So don't use stock photography, and don't use your high school prom photo from 25 years ago on your business card. Got it.
Only ironically.
Only ironically. Perfect. Okay. Sarah, was ditto your answer?
No, I was gonna say, I think we kind of covered this one already with the value proposition stuff, but don't assume that the consumers know what we do, and also don't speak down to them. I saw like far too many overly detailed blog posts and things that were more scary than anything. It's like, let's take a step back and remember these folks have not been paying attention to all these industry changes. So do not
Love that.
worry about it.
Love that. And again, last, certainly not least, Mr. Boero, one piece of advice for the people listening on what not to do going into 25.
Don't do something that anybody else in your market is doing. In terms of marketing, we tend to be a look around industry. We see somebody do something that we think is smart or might be getting a reaction, and we do that, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing, which is to look inward and then decide what you should be doing for your brand that is unique. So don't look around at your competitors too much for marketing ideas, because they're probably not doing a very good job.
Love that.
I love that. I love that. Well, with that said, I thank each and every single one of you for popping on. Can't thank you enough. And I hope I run into all of you soon at one of the shows that we're all bound to attend. Thank you. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, yeah, it did go fast, but we've been on for almost an hour.
Yeah.
We could talk for another hour, I'm sure, and an hour after that. So on the screen here is everybody's respective organizations. Feel free to scan the QR. It'll take you to their company pages. Feel free to look them up. These are all great people. Hopefully we were all able to learn something. I know I was, which it's always a good day when you can learn something new. And in this past hour, I've learned a few things. So Stephanie, Andrew, Brian, Sarah, thank you.
Thanks for having
And I
me.
hope you guys have a great rest of
Fun.
the week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good to see everybody.
Right.
See you all.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thanks for having us
Bye.
in.
Bye-bye.